Okay, let's dive in. Today we're really looking at two huge, seemingly separate issues facing the U.S.
That's right.
We've got this growing military pressure on Venezuela on one side,
Mm-hmm.
and then contrasting that sharply, there's the, frankly, devastating drug crisis happening right here at home.
Yeah, and the sources we're looking at paint a pretty stark picture. We're hearing reports of a U.S. naval armada heading towards Venezuela.
An armada? That sounds serious.
It is. The stated goal seems to be forcing Nicolas Maduro out, possibly even leading to an invasion.
Wow. And the sources are saying this is happening
Hmm.
quietly. How can an armada be quiet?
Well, quiet in the sense that maybe the implications aren't being fully discussed. The sources compare it to that near-miss war with Iran a few years back.
Oh, okay. So a huge move, but maybe not getting the critical discussion it warrants.
Exactly. And that's our mission today, right? To unpack the reasons given for this Venezuela focus.
And stack them up against the sheer scale of the drug problem destroying American communities.
Precisely.
So let's start with Venezuela itself.
Right.
Geographically, it's closer than many might think.
Oh, definitely. Caracas, the capital.
Huh.
That's what, about 475 miles by sea from San Juan, Puerto Rico?
Which is U.S. territory. So yeah, super close, as one source put it.
And that proximity brings immediate risks if things escalate into conflict.
Like migration.
Absolutely. That's a huge one. Wars always trigger massive population movements. Think about Syria in 2015.
Right, the U.S. was involved there, and the result was, what was the figure?
About 1.3 million asylum seekers headed into Western Europe.
And the impact described in the sources was, well, pretty chaotic for those receiving countries. Strained systems, social disruption.
Yeah, terms like completely destroyed and totally unrecognizable were used to describe the impact on some areas. So with Venezuela being that close.
A similar migrant crisis hitting the U.S. is a very rational, very real concern.
It is. And then beyond migration, there's the unavoidable cost in human lives.
American lives, if troops are committed or bombs are dropped.
Of course. And this isn't new, is it? This tension with Venezuela. It's been building for, what, at least 10 years? Tough sanctions, pushes for regime change?
Yeah, I remember the sources mentioning Hugo Chavez's claims years ago about the CIA and cancer. It's a long history.
A very long and troubled history. Which brings us to the why. Why push so hard for regime change now?
Especially, as you said, with the risks involved. Let's unpack the reasons given. It usually starts with ideology, right?
Yeah.
Democracy.
That's the common narrative. Maduro's government is, economically very left-wing.
But here's where the sources throw a curveball. Socially. Venezuela is actually quite conservative.
Extremely conservative.
Yeah.
Banning gay marriage, abortion, sex changes. It's one of the most socially conservative places in the hemisphere.
Which makes the democracy angle complicated. Because the U.S.-backed opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado.
She reportedly favors gay marriage.
So the U.S. is backing someone whose social views clash with the existing government's conservative base.
It does make you question if promoting democracy in the way we usually think of it is the main driver. The sources even point to, say, UK government censorship policies and ask why there's no intervention talk there if democracy is the sole standard.
Okay, so if the ideology democracy angle feels a bit thin, what about the big one, oil?
Ah, yes. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on the planet. More than Saudi Arabia?
That sounds like a pretty clear motive.
It does, but there are catches. The oil is mostly low-grade, heavy crude, difficult and expensive to process.
Right, and the sources said sanctions and mismanagement have wrecked the infrastructure needed to get it out.
Exactly. So if the primary goal was just getting the oil, wouldn't the logical step be to lift some sanctions?
Yeah.
Let U.S. companies go and rebuild, extract.
Instead of sending an armada.
Precisely. And the sources mentioned Maduro actually offered the U.S. a very lucrative deal involving oil and gas stakes.
Which was rejected.
Rejected. That strongly suggests the goal isn't just resource access, it's complete regime change. Control.
Okay, so oil alone doesn't quite explain the current military posture either. What about the security arguments? Drugs and terrorism. We hear figures like Lindsey Graham linking Venezuela to Hezbollah and the drug trade.
Right. That's another key justification put forward. The war is needed to fight drugs and stop Venezuela's supposed partnership with Hezbollah.
But does the data back that up? Where are the drugs coming from?
Well, according to the data cited in our sources, fentanyl and meth overwhelmingly trace back to Mexico.
Okay.
Cocaine, primarily Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia.
So not Venezuela.
Venezuela isn't flagged as a major source for the U.S. market, and the main cartels causing havoc inside the U.S. They're Mexican, not Venezuelan.
So the idea of invading Caracas to stop fentanyl in, say, Chicago,
Yeah,
that connection seems weak based on the flow data.
very weak. And the Hezbollah link.
Yeah, connecting a conflict in Venezuela to securing southern Lebanon. How does that work?
It's a stretch. The sources basically ask, where's the evidence of Hezbollah funded by Venezuelan money actively harming Americans within the United States?
Seems like a fair question. If that link isn't solid, it feels more like a narrative to justify other motives.
That's what the analysis suggests. Which leads us to maybe the deeper, less discussed drivers.
Geopolitics.
Yeah.
Resources beyond just oil.
Both. On the geopolitics side, some in D.C. frame it as flipping the chessboard against Russia and China.
Even though the sources doubt Russia or China would actually fight to defend Venezuela.
Right. It might be more about projecting strength, that whole being strong again idea, but don't discount the broader resource play.
You mentioned more than just oil.
Yeah. Venezuela has oil, yes, but also natural gas, gold, emeralds, even lithium. Significant deposits.
And gold is interesting, with central banks globally trying to increase their reserves. Controlling Venezuelan gold could be strategically important.
Potentially. And while the oil is heavy, the extraction costs could eventually be much lower than domestic U.S. drilling, maybe half the cost, long term.
So it's a long game for resource control, potentially.
It looks that way, and the goal seems to be total control, not partnership, given the rejection of Maduro's deal.
And the opposition plays into this. There was that anecdote about Machado.
Yes, the report that she promised, if installed, to move the Venezuelan embassy in Israel to Jerusalem.
A symbolic move, but one clearly aimed at.
Playing to the audience, the powerful financial and political interests perceived to be making the ultimate decisions, appealing to the oligarch class, essentially.
Okay, so rejecting deals, pushing for total control via regime change. It points towards a strategy focused outward, willing to bear significant costs.
Immense costs, potential war, migration, casualties.
But while all this attention and these resources are potentially flowing towards Venezuela, what's happening back home? What crisis is being neglected?
And that pivot is crucial, because the scale of the domestic drug crisis it's almost incomprehensible.
The sources state that more Americans have died from drug overdoses in the last 100 years than in all U.S. wars combined. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of them.
Just pause and absorb that statistic. It reframes everything.
It really does. If the actual goal was saving American lives from the drug threat,
Then the focus wouldn't be in Armada off the coast of South America. It would be on the sources and distributors here.
like the Mexican cartels dominating the trade,
Yeah.
and the dealers in U.S. cities.
Exactly. The sources point out that much of the street-level dealing has been effectively outsourced to foreign nationals, Mexican, Guatemalan, and others operating within the U.S. A crackdown there would be the direct approach.
But instead of that direct approach, what are we seeing in terms of domestic policy? Let's look at that Portland, Oregon example.
Right. You have nonprofits like Portland Street Medicine running these pop-ups, giving away free drug paraphernalia, clean needles, pipes.
Often near schools, the sources noted.
Yes. And the stated goal is harm reduction. Noble intention, perhaps.
But the immediate result described is chaos.
Pretty much. The giveaway attracts users, naturally, and where users gather.
Dealers show up, selling fentanyl and meth right there, out in the open. It creates these zones of intense disorder.
And we have the perspective of Jenny Burton, a recovered addict cited in the sources. Her take is quite critical.
She argued that handing out pipes and needles doesn't actually help people get better.
Worse, she argues it helps them stay stuck. It facilitates the addiction, turning dependency itself into an industry.
An industry. How so?
She pointed to projections after 9/11 suggesting the social service and drug counseling sectors were expected to explode. Her implication is that the system can become invested, maybe unintentionally, in managing the crisis rather than ending it.
That's a powerful critique. And it ties into this housing first policy we see in places like Seattle.
Right. The logic sounds reasonable on the surface. Get people housed first, provide stability, and then recovery will follow.
But it's not working out that way.
Yeah.
Seattle committed $40 million.
And the key issue is that sobriety is often not required. Funding is tied to filling beds, distributing supplies, basically, capacity, not on whether people actually achieve recovery.
So the outcomes aren't good.
The sources report increases in overdose deaths inside these housing facilities, more violence, even cartel activity moving in. And crucially, in that $40 million Seattle example,
How much went to actual abstinence-based treatment?
$0. None of it was earmarked for programs focused on getting people completely off drugs.
Wow. So the policies seem to be failing, even enabling the problem. And meanwhile, the drugs themselves are getting
It's
worse,
unbelievably worse. Heroin is almost gone, replaced by fentanyl.
which is incredibly potent on its own.
Right. But now, fentanyl is increasingly being mixed with xylazine.
That's the animal tranquilizer, street name Trank or Tran.
That's the one. And the effects are horrific. It causes these terrible, rotting sores on users' bodies, necrosis.
Leading to amputation.
Frequently, it's described as a living death, utter degradation. And it's becoming the norm. Sources say 90% of the fentanyl heroin supply in Philadelphia is now cut with xylazine.
Just devastating. And for people like Jenny Burton who actually got out, what does she say worked?
Accountability. She stated directly that being arrested, facing consequences, being incarcerated or separated from that environment, that's what saved her life.
So not enabling, but intervention. Consequences.
Her argument is that society has to intervene, forcefully remove people from that path, and hold accountable not just the users, but also the institutions, the NGOs, the policymakers pushing these harm reduction or housing first models that seem to be failing so badly.
It really brings the contrast into sharp focus. We have this massive potential expenditure and focus on regime change in Venezuela.
Based on rationales, democracy, oil, drugs that seem questionable or secondary when you dig into them.
While at home, a verifiable crisis is killing Americans on an unprecedented scale, fueled by demonstrably failing policies.
U.S. leaders seem obsessed with these distant geopolitical games: Hezbollah, Russia, China, Ukraine. Threats that arguably pose minimal direct existential danger to the average American.
While ignoring or even enabling through policy, the thing that is destroying American lives and cities from the inside out.
Think about the resources, the cost of that naval deployment, the planning, the potential conflict. What could that achieve if redirected?
You could fund serious abstinence-based recovery programs. You could secure downtown areas in places like Atlanta or Portland that are described as being in total collapse.
It's a fundamental question of priorities. Where should the focus be? On complex foreign interventions with dubious track records, or on the clear and present danger devastating our own communities?
Which leads us to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to wrestle with.
Given the history, where U.S. regime change efforts abroad rarely seem to succeed in the long run.
And given the clear, measurable failures of current domestic drug policies like housing first and harm reduction,
What would be the most radical, yet potentially most cost-effective and maybe most moral action the U.S. government could take right now?
what single shift in focus or policy would actually save the most American lives, addressing the crisis that's undeniably here, rather than the ones potentially brewing overseas?